you surprised, given that they only issued guidance in late Jan and already factored this in a little bit? Were you surprised they had to come out again on this topic, or do you think a lot of others are going to follow suit?
Yeah, I think others are going to follow suit, but let's just call it like it is. I mean, they definitely took it off quicker than I think many had anticipated, especially that we're in mid-February. I mean, and I think it just shows that the supply chain is so significantly negatively impacted to this point. They had to take guidance off the table. I think what you're seeing in the stock is investors, going back to a year ago and just going back to the 5G supercycle thesis, as you talked about, that doesn't change. Demand doesn't change. I view it more as a timing issue, but I think it just shows this is probably just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what we're going to see across the broader semi and tech food chain.
How serious is it for a company like Apple to have a significant supply chain disruption like this?
Well, it's a gut punch. It's the hearts and lungs of Cupertino. It is on the supply chain. I think when you looked at the announcement last night, our issue was not as much demand because that's going to spike back in terms of just what we see in the install base. It's about the supply chain, how long this continues. When could they get to 100% in terms of Foxconn? Does this impact 5G phones coming out later this year? And that's why Apple continues to be the poster child when it comes to the supply chain. And that's why the question now is going to be, in terms of the conversations I'm having with investors, how quickly this rebounds, what does June, September look like, and do any phones get pushed out?
Dan, when you look at your universe, what are the companies that haven't warned yet that you're concerned about that might have even higher exposure to supply chains?
Well, I think right now it's really across semi. So obviously you continue to go through the whole semi-food chain. When you look at Intel and AMD and every sort of chip maker in terms of right now what we're seeing, I think what you're seeing in the stocks is different maybe than what you're seeing in the supply chain. That's why I continue to view this as a hand-holding exercise in terms of from an investor perspective. It goes back to how we view China and the overall demand thesis for Apple right now. I continue to think that $400 price target for me gets maybe extended in terms of how it's going to ultimately transpire. But this doesn't impact the negative thesis, although definitely it's an overhang.
So, Steve, question is what to do with the stock. And it's obviously a huge deal because Apple's such a huge influential company, but the stock is off less than 2%. So did you get your buying opportunity like you got last time around when we showed you when they warned on China revenues?
No, this is not the buying opportunity in Apple. I like it. I own it. I actually traded a little this morning when it came in or looked at the screen the first time. It was down about $9. Bought some. Got out a couple of bucks later, so it was a trading opportunity. That's great if you're in front of your screen. Don't recommend it for most people at home. But it's barely down.
Right.
The stock has doubled despite flat revenues, flat earnings, actually down revenues, down earnings. So I'm a big believer in the future of it, but this is not the point. We can't overstate down less than 2%. Here's the other thing. When I was looking at my screen, I own Alibaba also. The stock that was acting best of all the stocks was Alibaba. Why? Because the Chinese are infusing massive liquidity into the system there, number one. Number two, Chinese insurance companies can't really buy foreign equities. So Alibaba has that dual listing now. Tencent they could buy. It's got that Hong Kong listing. So those stocks have acted pretty well. But it's an indication of what a centralized government can do in terms of getting the market up and supporting it. So I'm with you. I don't think demand's going to be an issue. I think the timing of it may be an issue, not the demand
Liquidity
itself.
is great, but it's not going to open factories and bring people to work.
No, that's why I say it's the timing.
Yeah.
So there's going to be further slowing. I don't have confidence anybody's got a grip on the coronavirus. We'll hear more about it later on. So I expect more supply chains to be shut down. Skyworks has a lot of visibility there. Corvo, a lot of visibility there. So yes, they're more susceptible, they're more volatile, but maybe you want to dip your toe in there. I would wait though.
Dan, if this did mean, which I don't think is people's base case, but if it did mean that a 5G phone for Apple was pushed back a year or into next calendar year, would that lead you to cut your price target?
Look, that would be a game changer if that got pushed past the fall, because that's key to the supercycle thesis. So that's why right now the question is...
How much would that be worth if it was pushed back into early 21?
Look, I think 5G right now, if you look at 5G is worth what I view is probably $50 to $75 for the stock. We don't see that being pushed out. That's why right now, in terms of the stock, it continues to be Teflon-like because of the demand in the 5G thesis. It's a bump in the road, but also it comes down to Cook. Cook ultimately, if you look at the last year, navigated some of probably the biggest storms Apple's seen post-iPhone. That's why right now I have a lot of credibility, at least in the eyes of the street, to navigate through this turbulence.
I think the stock could barely reflect a push out of 5G phones. So I'm going to disagree. The market's been there for about 6 months on 5G, not launching, in other words, for a year till after the market got there. The fact they know it's still going to launch, it's inevitable. Who's going to go and sell their stock where they should have a lot of gains, pay taxes, and then come back in? I don't think it does anything as long as the phone's out there, number one. Number two, 5G in the U.S. is going to be meaningless to the consumer, except for a little faster speed, versus South Korea, where it's a full 5G network. I'm not going to get technical aspects of it, but it might be better to launch then when you have more of a network from Verizon.